A, meeting opening. A1, call to order. A2, pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will now observe a 30-second moment of silence. Thank you. We'll move to A3, adoption of the agenda. Are there any consent agenda items that a board member would like to have discussed as an action item?
Oops. I would like to have,
Speak more into the microphone.
better rather than having it up in my nose. I would like to take off of the consent agenda item E3, personnel.
Okay. E3, personnel. Is there any other consent agenda items that a board member would like to have discussed as an action item? Mr. DePezza? No? Ms. Alhambra? Hearing none, do I have a motion that the governing board adopt the meeting agenda?
I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
The meeting
The
agenda.
meeting agenda. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving to B1, educational services presentation.
Good afternoon, President Conchas, governing board members, Dr. Maya's assistant superintendents, Alhambra community. My name is Raul Ruiz. I'm the executive director of educational services, along with my colleague Laura Defaba, who's here from educational services as our data and assessment specialist. And what we'd like to present to you all tonight is information regarding the A through F letter grade framework. And it's important that we begin the discussion this evening by saying that all of the information we're going to share with you is information that is available for our district from the state at this moment. The letter grades will be published on November 1st, and what we're sharing with you is data that we have available to help paint the picture of the framework so that when it does become official, you all will be the most versed board members in how to understand the information specific to the letter grades and how those letter grades are established. So we look forward to sharing some really cool data with you here. And you're going to hear us say over and over and over, this is preliminary data, but we've been checking it for the past, well, pretty much since it's been published from the state, and it hasn't changed at all. So we're optimistic that it remains the same, and that, again, you will become very versed in how this all works. So the K through 8 letter grade model, the framework, is summed up in this nice little graphic here where you can see that growth accounts for 50% of your letter grade as a school, right? And we're going to get into each of these topics in depth, but ultimately, when you compare two districts with completely different demographics, it's not fair that one district may have a higher percent of proficiency and another district has a lower percent of proficiency, and to simply compare them apples to apples wouldn't be fair. So what the state has understood is that growth is a significant part of how we should measure schools, and even those kiddos who are struggling and a bit behind have the potential to grow just as well as their peers in a different district where they may, those students might be performing at higher proficiency levels. So this is an effort to level the playing field, and that's why it accounts for so much of the framework at 50% of it. What you'll notice is these percentages are going to also transfer to points available. So when we speak of 50 percentage points, it's going to be 50 points in our discussion, so keep that in mind. 50% for growth, proficiency accounts for 30%, EL accounts for 10%, along with the 10% for acceleration and readiness. And again, we'll get into detail about what each of these means. So proficiency, let's talk about this first slice of the pie here. 30% of the framework accounts for proficiency, and as it notes there, you can earn up to those 30 points. And this is measured by the ASAA assessment, state assessment in ELA and mathematics, along with the alternative assessment, the MSAA in both ELA and mathematics. And it essentially measures performance among students in these two subjects. And students who achieve highly proficient receive the most points. So when you consider proficiency rates for districts, the highest performing students are going to fetch the most points and get you closer to the potential of earning all 30 of those framework points. So as of right now, these are the data that are available for our schools related to proficiency. Of the 30 points possible, you'll see there that the state has published for our district, and we have access to this information, and this is the distribution of the proficiency out of 30 points for our schools. Now, you'll notice some single-digit numbers there, and you'll notice something like Alhambra Traditional School is close to reaching the max number of proficiency points there. It's no secret that we have, in the wake of the COVID pandemic and all of the challenges that brought to education, that statewide proficiency is lower than it was historically prior to that experience, right? So having higher proficiency points is just a more difficult task at the moment, and we're on our way, and I think we're going to see some real shining moments here as we get into growth, because that's really what's going to paint the most accurate picture about what schools are doing in these years that are following the pandemic. So these are, again, preliminary data points that are currently available that the state is publishing, and we present them to you tonight for you to acquaint yourself with how this particular measure takes place. Let's get on to this big one of growth, because that's really where we can demonstrate what's been happening coming back from distance learning in our district. And with growth, as noted, you can earn up to 50 points, and that accounts for 50% of the grade framework. And what is measured here is what is referred to as the student growth percentiles. Now, I'm going to explain with that. I'm going to do my best to explain, but I think I'm going to help you to understand what it means by the end of this presentation, and it's specific to ELA and math, right? So what is a student growth percentile? Let's get to it here on this simple graph. If you look at this distribution and you take a student's score from a year ago and compare it to the score that happened this year, the change is how we are measuring growth, right? So you've got some students whose growth is this wide, some students whose growth is this wide. You've got ginormous growth that is, very, very wide. And what the state does is it essentially ranks it from the lowest amount of growth to the highest amount of growth. And it just puts it in this normal curve of a distribution, and it then slices it up very evenly. So that first line is at the 33rd percentile. The second line is at the 66th percentile, so what you have is literally that entire distribution of growth sliced up into thirds, right? The lowest third is what the state qualifies as low growth. The middle is average growth, and then what is above the 67th percentile is what they call high growth. So we've got low growth, average growth, high growth, and let's take a look at how our students in Alhambra fared. So this is math data, and notice that it starts at 4th through 8th grade. We have state assessments that begin at 3rd grade, and the reason that it doesn't start accounting for growth until 4th grade is it needs that initial data point, right? So they have taken the test as 3rd graders. It's not till 4th grade that we can actually start to look at what growth means, because we have to compare the two data points of two assessments. So let's start at the very bottom, because I think this is where it gets starts painting a picture, because then we can kind of progressively work our way through what the pandemic results looked like. But prior to the pandemic, in 17-18, our district, there on the far left, had 36% of our students in the low growth category. Now, just over a third of our students were in that lowest growth percentile group. And if you look at the 18-19 group, school year rather, we have about the same. We've got just above a third of our students who are in the lowest growth category. 19-20 saw no state assessment given because of the current state of affairs. And then the 2021 school year, This is the first year back, the first year that the state has offered assessment again after the pandemic. Nearly half of our students in Alhambra fell in that 45, in that low growth category. 45% of our students were in the lowest amount of growth. And again, it's important to note as compared to their Arizona peers. So this is Alhambra students being compared to all students throughout the state of Arizona. And 45% of our students were in that lowest category of growth. Then came 21-22, and that 29% there represents, right there on the far left for the 21-22, that represents the growth from last year to when the students took the test in May. And that is pretty fantastic because that growth is smaller, a category of the low growth percentile grouping there. That is a smaller number than even pre-pandemic. So let me say that again. If you take a look at the 35 and 36 pre-pandemic, we had that many students in low growth category. When you take a look at the 21-22 growth, that is lower than what we were achieving before. And that's fantastic because that means the opposite is true, that we had more students in the average and high growth category. So if you took a look at that line there just past the 29%, that was our district goal to work toward getting fewer than that in the low growth category, and we beat that goal. We actually did pretty well because our goal for ELA was 30% of our students would be in that low growth, 30% or less would be in the low growth category, and we actually had 29, so that's not too shabby at all. And if you take a look up top there, this is what we're contemplating and are looking forward to sharing with our school leaders as a consideration for the 22-23 year as it relates to growth. And I think we're pretty confident that we can actually work toward this and achieve it just as we did in this past year, with 20% or less of our students being in the lowest growth category. And another way of saying that, of course, is that 80% or more of our students are in the average or high growth categories. That's ELA. Let's take a look at math. Look at those bottom numbers again for 17-18, 18-19. You can see that over a third of our students were in the low growth category, right? 19-20 saw no assessment, and then look at the red in the 20-21 school year. We had 51, over half of our students, and that's pretty astonishing when you think about it, and it's almost difficult to say out loud, but over half of our students in mathematics were in the lowest category of growth as compared to their Arizona peers for the 20-21 school year. And when you take a look at what just came in for growth for the 21-22 school year, we literally bested our goal because we shattered it. We wanted 35% of our students. We just wanted to get back to pre-pandemic. Right there between 34 and 36%, we said 35 is going to be our goal. We got down to 26% of our students in the lowest growth category, and that is fantastic. And again, similarly with the 22-23 goal, we're looking at a 20-40-40 consideration that we want to share and get input from school leaders to see how we feel about setting that as the mark, because we are shooting for the stars right now and doing some pretty good work. So this is the information specific to growth in the framework, and here are the point distributions. Now, you may recall, growth accounts for 50% of the framework, or 50 points, right? Take a look at this. Now, I have to say one more time, this is really important. We're showing you the data that's available to our district right now so that you can understand this and use the data to conceptualize the framework, right? But we've been watching and they haven't been changing, so when this becomes official, we're really optimistic that it's gonna show some cool stuff. Take a look at the number of schools there. In fact, let's count them together. We've got one school there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 schools who literally maximized the growth potential, the growth points. They could not earn any more points because students at those 6 schools literally grew as compared to their Arizona peers so well that they maxed out the point possibility. Take a look at all the schools with 40 points there. We see schools that almost got to that 50% point opportunity and came really close. And this right here paints a heck of a picture for growth in Alhambra for the last school year. And it's extremely exciting because this is really going to cushion and start helping with that proficiency that we saw that's understandably difficult to raise overnight, but growth, on the other hand, is something we can always work toward every single day. So I'm going to pass it on to Laura, who is going to take a couple of the other slices of the equation here and kind of spell out what that looks like, and then we'll have an opportunity for any questions you have. Laura?
Thank you, Raul. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the English language learner section. There's 10 percentage points or 10 points available for ELL students. This is based off of the Azella test. We can earn 5 points for growth and 5 points for proficiency. It's based off of the state average for growth and the state average for proficiency. It compares how the school did to how the state did to determine how many points you earn. So these are the points that we've earned for English language learners for this past year. You can see that many of our schools have earned 8 points, which is close to the threshold of 10, which is the cap for EL. These points are pending, so we will wait to see what the state actually provides us in the next week. Acceleration readiness is a fun category. There are a lot of components that go into this. It is also capped at 10 points, but you can see between math, ELA for grade 8 and grade 3, there's 10 points possible just in those two categories. Chronic absenteeism, there's a possibility of 2 points. Inclusion of special education students in general education is possible 2 points. And improved growth of subgroups, there's a possible 26 points. So there's a lot of opportunity to earn those 10 points in acceleration readiness. 8th grade math, there are 2 ways to earn points in 8th grade math. You can either increase the highly proficient 8th grade math students or decrease in minimally proficient 8th grade math students. English language arts for grade 3, you can earn your 5 points by decreasing the school's current year minimally proficient percentage compared to the prior year, or maintaining a low minimally proficient average. Chronic absenteeism, we can get those points by decreasing the school's prior year chronic absenteeism percentage from the prior year. Inclusion of special education students, that we can earn points for by mainstreaming a minimum percentage of special education students into a general education classroom. And improved growth of subgroups. So we can earn points by improving the percent proficient in each of the subgroups. That includes things like race, EL, special education, military. There's several subgroups that we can earn those points through. And here is what our acceleration readiness points look like. You can see the majority of our schools earned all 10 points. And this is our preliminary points, so we will most likely see these remain steady, but we haven't had the finalized data yet from the state. So we have an opportunity to earn up to 5 bonus points. We can earn up to 3 bonus points for science, and that is based off of the AZ Sci. If we score above the statewide average, you can earn 1.5 points, and if you score well above the statewide average, we can earn 3 points. The second area of bonus points where we can earn points is special education enrollment. Schools with a percentage of statewide average of students enrolled in special education can earn 1, 1.5, or 2 points, depending on how close we are to the state average of special ed. I will tell you right now, science bonus points have not been awarded by the state yet. So that area hasn't been included in our state letter grade data that has been provided by the state. So you'll see here, most of our schools only have 2 points, but our science data has not been provided by the state yet.
Thank you, Laura. And the last slide here is a quick summary of what took place last week. The State Board of Education met to establish what they called cutoff scores. And the cutoff scores are the ranges of scores for each of the different grade designations from A to F, right? And you can see there the maximum number of points, as I mentioned earlier, is 100 points, and the minimum of that range is 84.67, and then you see B and the ranges for each of these respective grades. That was voted on unanimously last week by the state. That is for sure static, that is for sure. And these are going to be the ranges for the school letter grades when they are officially published. And we chose not to give information about how the points that we just shared with you that are immediately available to our district and these ranges here, we didn't want to couple those in a slide and present to the public a bit prematurely, and we're waiting for the state to do that. But what we have been doing is watching daily. As I mentioned, they have not changed, and you have before you a document that shows each of those schools and their respective number of points and how that relates to this range of grades here. So I see some, do we have those copies? Okay, wonderful. I'm sorry. I was just reading some of the body language and I wasn't sure if that was available to you all or not. But nevertheless, it will definitely be made available if you don't have it immediately in front of you. And that is what we wanted to share with you all. Again, being very cautious and careful to say the state has not officially published these grades yet, but we wanted to present the data that we do as a district have access to and paint a picture within the context of that framework so that you all know exactly how it works. And when it comes out officially, you will say, I got it. That's exactly what's happening here. So at this time, we'd like to open it up to any questions you might have.
And again, it's being shared with you as is because it is preliminary. And so we're sharing it just with you. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In looking at the growth ratings, I'm assuming that the only it's measured by only the previous point in the previous year. Is that, so the percentage of growth is taken from 1 year before and that's it? Is that how growth is measured?
The state actually uses data from previous years as well.
Okay.
So it could go back 2 to 3 years prior to that. It
Okay.
groups students together in a cohort, depending on their data from the past years, depending on how much data we have for the previous years.
Okay, so it's just not the previous year. It could possibly be several. Okay, that's good. I was gonna say if it's only one data point, it'll be very difficult to see a similar jump next year. But if it's cumulative, then yeah, it is possible to get that. So, thank you.
That's a really good statistical consideration, but it is really worth noting that when you think about how this is being measured throughout the state, our growth percentiles are so significant, and that is our kiddos being compared to kiddos throughout the entire state of Arizona. And it's painting a heck of a picture because similarly, that same statistical consideration is being applied to all other districts. And when you look at as Laura noted, it does account for those 3 years, but really the most significant jump from last year to this year is what's accounting for a great deal of growth as that longitudinal data shared from how we were performing in 16, 17, 18, 19, and so on. So great question, and there definitely are lots of different statistical considerations built into the framework. In fact, you may have noted that we just last year, this past May, took the ASAA assessment. The year prior was the AZ Merit Assessment, and there had to be statistical consideration given to how to compare these two different assessments and the points and everything involved. So we leave that to the statisticians at the state level, but wanted to give kind of a brief sketch of how it worked and appreciate your question.
Mr. Rivera, in your presentation, we see Valencia newcomer has come in pretty low on all of your slides. Could you explain that?
Yes, of course. So, and I'm very glad you asked the question because it's important to note to the community that that is not a fair representation of how that school is performing. In fact, the framework as it applies to K through 8 schools is for traditional schools that operate with students who remain in the school for some time. The model at the Valencia school is one that is intended to bring kiddos to become acclimated to education in Arizona, and for the short duration to then get back and transition to one of the more traditional schools. And for that, we are in the current process of evaluating our framework and how our model is going to account for the fact that the state is currently imposing this framework for that school, but that's not the way the school is really operating. So I applaud the tremendous work that's happening at the Valencia school, and what they're doing with that community is phenomenal. We have heard time and time again wonderful celebrations of that great work, but we are currently working to get that out of the equation as it's being currently measured.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera, and I do want to echo your sentiment that there is a lot of amazing instruction happening at Valencia newcomer. Thank you.
Mr. Ruiz.
Mr. Ruiz, what did I call you?
Rivera.
Rivera, I'm so sorry.
Twice.
Mr. Rivera's right there. Ruiz, Mr. Ruiz, and then I always get you three mixed up. So sorry.
I'm used to it.
I just want to applaud you for bringing that presentation forward. It's a lot of data to analyze and cook down to where we can understand it and make it simple enough for all of us to understand. And I appreciate all that effort.
Did it work?
Mr. Ruiz.
Oh, thank you very much. Wonderful. Just one more time, it's the preliminary data we have available, and we brought it forth for your consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a couple.
Mhm.
Obviously, you knew I was going to say something. As for Valencia, it's definitely a totally different entity, and I would never want that school to feel less than any other school in our district. So the formula for this year, I'm curious to know what's going to be the formula for next year, because we know they change it, and it's an election year, and I wonder why the formula is the way it is this year, and everybody's getting A's and B schools. And I'm talking in my district too. So please understand, I'm not mad about our scores by any means. I just have an issue with the way it was done this year. I don't think schools should have gotten scores because of the new test, and you're comparing two different things. I'm glad they're counting growth, but at some point, because we used to do this before years ago, growth ends up being, we're leaving the low ones behind. So I want to ensure that we are not keeping our low lows there just because we want to make sure we're growing the ones we can grow. Then special education points. I hope we don't really try for those points, because I think that's one of the worst things that the state does, is try and get us to keep a low number when we need to service our children. So I hope we're not going for that one. And all the schools did a fabulous job, though, seriously, so I'm very happy about that.
I don't have a question. I just have another comment. This represents a huge amount of work, not only for our students, but the staff that were coming back into the classroom, having gone through all the changes in how they taught through the COVID, coming back, not dealing isn't the right word, putting their strategies in place to accommodate those students who hadn't been in a classroom for a long time. I don't want to discredit the parents either, because this was a huge accomplishment for the parents to step up and get the children back into the schools. This is truly a community effort that we see here. I understand what you're saying about the cut scores, but I think we should take what we've got and be proud of all the effort that our staff, our students, and our families put into, and that means the custodian, the cafeteria worker, the bus driver, the people here at this office, they all take a piece of this. And let's celebrate it while we can.
I did not mean anything negative about our scores if you took it that way. I am very happy with our scores. I'm not happy with our state. So there's a complete different issue there.
And thank you, Ms. De Ocampo, for reminding. I guess this is a question since it's not in the presentation. I was very impressed with the percentage of, what's going on here? The percentage of students that are that were tested. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, as you note in the document that you have available there, all of our schools were at 95% or above, with the exception of one that was just below. And so the number of students tested this past year was phenomenal, and we did a good job. So, to all the remarks that have been made, it's no coincidence that among all the different considerations for this framework, growth was the highest performing factor, and we will continue to grow, continue to set our sights on improving in all of these categories, and whatever the framework should become in the coming school year, for the next round of testing, we will continue to strive toward growth and even increasing those numbers, because until we get 100% of our students tested and 100% of them proficient, we will not relent.
Any other comments? No? All right, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the hard work, and we look forward to continuing these discussions.
Thank you.
All right, board members, we will move to B2, City of Glendale, Bethany Home, Grand Avenue Drainage Improvement Presentation. And we have Mr. Shields. Did I get your last name right?
Good evening, President Conchas, members of the board, Superintendent Myers, Alhambra community. A couple months ago, the district was approached by the City of Glendale regarding a Bethany Home, as you can see on the slide there, a Bethany Home Grand Avenue Drainage Improvement Project. With that, we began some discussion with them to get a better understanding of what it is exactly that they're trying to accomplish. And with that said, part of that involved the city requesting an easement onto our property and or the purchase of the retention area that is southeast of Carol G. Peck School over on 51st Avenue in Bethany Home and Grand. So what we have done this evening is we have asked a couple representatives that I'll introduce shortly here to come to the board meeting tonight and provide you guys with a presentation with information in regards to these improvements and engage that discussion. So tonight we have Mr. David Beard. He's the city engineer for the City of Glendale. He will be coming up shortly and presenting. And also we have Miss Lisa Amos, who is the City of Glendale real estate professional. So with that, I will turn the mic over to them. They will provide you with the presentation and answer any questions you may have at the end.
Good evening, President Conchas, board members, and staff. My name is David Beard. I'm the city engineer in Glendale, and we do have a big project here. And I'd like to go over a presentation with you. It's got some pictures in it, and I'm here to answer any questions. And then at the end, what I'd like to do is, I think later on in your agenda, you have an item to continue to move forward. And so I'll stick around to answer any questions you have at that point. This is Lisa Amos. She is our real estate professional, and she's going to answer, or she's got a couple slides in here regarding how we handle property acquisition or easement acquisition. So,
Thank you.
sure, let me get started here. I guess somehow. Go ahead too fast? Okay. Let me stay behind the microphone here. If anybody's been over there by Carol G. Peck School at 51st and Bethany, you've driven through this. And this picture was taken a few years ago because gas was only $2.83 when we took it. But the picture on the left is on Bethany Home Road, and you're looking back towards Grand Avenue, you can see the overpass. And then the picture on the right is just about in the same spot. It's kind of on the other side of the price sign, and it's looking back on Bethany Home Road towards the school. And whenever it rains, it's like this, and it stays like this for a day or two. And I'll get to the reason why here in a minute. Okay, go ahead. So where this all started was that flooding at that intersection, and we got a call from Sanderson Ford. And we went out there after a rain event. I don't remember when this was, but you can see the gentleman up against the wall, how high the water got on the wall. This is on their property. And this is also on their property, and not exactly sure where, but you can see it's eroded, and the gate, the post is there with the concrete, and you can see the irrigation controllers and pipe exposed, cars in the water, and then their fence. So they've made several insurance claims for damage to vehicles and other things in this process. Okay, next slide. Well, that's kind of small. Okay. The school is right here, Carol G. Peck School. This is Grand, and then 51st Avenue is right here. So this is it's a very large drainage area. The drainage area extends up to about Maryland Avenue, and it gets wider and then kind of gets smaller when you get up towards Maryland. But all the water comes down 47th Avenue, right here, 47th Avenue, and it goes through it. I think this is called Maryland Lakes. I said Maryland, I think I meant Missouri, sorry. We'll go okay. So Maryland Lakes, all the water comes in through Maryland Lakes into this basin, kind of, there's a pipe, and the water then goes over here into Roselawn Park, and then also into this ADOT retention. It's a very small basin, retention basin here, and then flows down 51st Avenue, and it all ends up right here. So 100, also the water comes to 47th Avenue, it turns on Bethany Home Road, same thing, downhill to this point right here. It's a bathtub down there. It's a bowl, fills up with water with one very small drain. And that drain is an SRP irrigation line. The problem is when it rains, that irrigation line is full. So there's no capacity in that line to take any water. What happens is that bowl or that bathtub fills up, and eventually it fills up high enough and it spills over Grand Avenue and then runs down Grand. So what you've seen is when you drive through it, that's the max. That's what it can rain harder, you're still going to get the same thing. It can rain a little bit and you'll get that. So we get the same thing in that intersection every time it rains because it fills up and it spills over. What we've got is a kind of a three-prong approach to solving this problem. So I split it into three packages, the project. So I call package one is the 51st Avenue piece. This is this piece right here. And the idea is we want to try to take care of Sanderson Ford's issue. And package two is along Grand Avenue. That's what I'm here to talk to you about. And this is the basin we're talking about right here. We'll get a little more detailed here in a minute. Bethany Home Road is right here, school right there. And then 47th Avenue. And so what we're going to do is we're going to install a storm drain on 47th Avenue, and we want to intercept that water. We want to intercept the rainwater before it gets to the intersection. And instead of letting it go through this series of basins and end up at the intersection, we want to intercept it. We want to catch the water here, take it down, cross Missouri, and into that real big basin at 43rd and Camelback. You've seen it. It's really big. It's deep. That's what we want to do. We want to take the water to that point. So by doing that, we cut about 50% of the water off from making its way through those series of basins down to the intersection. Here's a little closer or blow up of the school. The school's right there. We're looking at two options. One is a pipe, Bethany Home Road, and then down south through not through the parking lot, but through 49th Avenue, which is the access to this road, and then through that basin, and then ultimately Missouri, and then into the big basin at 43rd and Camelback. And in that process, we would want to make that basin, go and flip to the next one, please. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. Can you go one more? Okay. We want to make that basin a little bit bigger, a little deeper. The idea is we need to hold a little more water and we want to store it, and then we want to let it out very slow. So we need to make it a little bit deeper to do that. Okay, now back up one. I know this is really blurry. Do you remember back when you had a VCR and you make a recording of it, and then you made a recording of that recording? That's what happened here. I made a picture of a picture of a picture, and it just lost its resolution. So what we've got is Bethany Home Road, pipe, turn it south down that access road. The school's here, and then we want to turn it in to that basin. And in the process, we want to pick up you have a storm drain in that parking lot. We want to pick up that water, and instead of letting it flow through the park, we want to put it in the pipe and then into that park. Okay, next slide. Kind of gone over this one already. Go ahead and go to the next one. All right. I know you can't see it, but the important thing here is this is our schedule. The green items that you see are property acquisition. That's for the school. Today's date is October 27th. And each one of these blue sections are design. So 30%, 60%, 90%, 100%. And we want to be finished with the design by the end of July. Not construction, just design. And then once we get that done, then we would try to coordinate, as long as we can get everything worked out, we want to coordinate our construction with the school year and other things, but you're probably looking at, probably not next summer, but the earliest case will be the summer after that for construction. And it depends on I'm sure you've seen it all. We have huge increase in costs on our construction. So in a lot of our capital improvement plan, we've had to kind of shift projects back or extend them out. This may be the same thing. We just need to see where the prices come in. All right, at this point, I want to turn over to Lisa Amos and let her talk about the process for acquisition. And then we'll turn it back over to questions, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Lisa.
Is that that move advances?
No, there's your point right there.
Oh, okay. Good evening, President, Superintendent, and board members. One of our first steps in acquiring any real estate is identifying what it is we need. Do we need to buy the property outright or get an easement? And in this case, the easement would be for stormwater. We don't, unilaterally decide that. That's between you and us together. Would you consider selling the whole basin to us? Would you prefer to grant us an easement? And that's to be determined as we go along in the process. We've already done a site visit with Matt and Scott from the Carol G. Peck School, explained what we had in mind, pretty much what you saw here, the overall project and why we're looking at Carol G. Peck Basin. We've obtained an access agreement, and that's so an appraiser could go on the site. They would contact the school and say, yeah, I'm coming out. And eventually, if we come to some agreement, we'd have to do an environmental assessment. It's a part of acquiring any property, not just particularly this one. And we kind of wait to the last minute on that because they're only good for 6 months. Somewhere along the way, as we get closer to agreeing and yeah, we're gonna do an easement, or if you'd like to sell the property, we'll get a title report just like you do when you're buying or selling a house. And we have our consultant write a legal description and a map, which any real estate transaction has that. Next slide, please. What we do is we look at these various things that we've ordered, the appraisal, the environmental assessment. We present an offer to you to purchase the easement or to purchase the whole land, or maybe you think it's so beneficial, here's the easement, here's the land. There's different ways things happen, and we certainly get a market value appraisal, but it's going to be negotiated and we'll work it out together. We'll draft a purchase and sale agreement or the drainage easement. Our attorney, your attorney, they'll work out language. And then when we all get in agreement on that, the agreement goes to our council, you as a board, however your processes work, And ultimately, like any real estate transaction, if it's a sale of the land, we get into an escrow. If it's the easement, we probably don't do that, but that depends on your requirements as well. Fairly straightforward process. A lot of things are not linear. They overlap, like the appraisal, then the legal description might be overlapping when the phase one is done. So kind of how it works, and it's land stuff's not a lot different than when we deal with houses. Next.
Can we go back just a couple slides?
Sure.
Keep going, one more. One more. Let's do one more. And one more. Right there, right there. I think that's a good one. So I think one thing I didn't specifically say was what we're talking about is this piece of property right here. And we are either looking to get a stormwater easement across that or purchase it. And Elisa said, it really depends on really kind of what you're looking for. So that's specifically why we're here, is we want to move forward with something along that lines. And okay, now to the questions.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and start off our discussion with a few questions, if that is that okay? My first question is on the schedule. I was wondering if there will be any public comment from the residential property owners on those streets. I think that their input, knocking on their door, talking to them, and ensuring that they know what's happening or being proposed is extremely important, because myself, I live in this area very close by, and it's been my experience that the city council or the city doesn't actually ask the residents before making proposed changes. And I think that for me, that's extremely important. So is there anything in your schedule or your plan to get public comment from residents?
We will have a public, when we get the plans ready, and when we kind of, right now, we're really just kind of figuring out, hey, how much water is there? What size is the pipe going to be? Where can we put it? When we get all those things answered in the design process, yes, before we go to any construction, we'll go to get feedback and input from the community.
Thank you. I now open up the floor to our board members for any questions.
Thank you. That was one of my questions. My other question is, does the school currently use that piece of property for anything? Does anybody know? Matt? Oops, we lost it.
Mrs. Ocampo, to answer that question, currently that property is not utilized by the school. And just something to keep in mind for your consideration is we're kind of restricted and limited to what we could do with that property. Right now, basically, the only use that we have is sending our maintenance guys, grounds guys out there on a quarterly basis to clean it and keep the weeds down, so we don't get a letter from the city of Glendale that we're in violation. So I hope that answers your question. Currently, there is no use by the school. Personally, I don't know if I would recommend using that area just because it's right
Next
along
to the
Grand
road.
Avenue, and it's,
It's not an ideal lot.
yeah,
spot.
traffic on Grand Avenue drives extremely fast.
Yes,
So,
I've noticed.
The only thing, and again, this is a consideration, the only thing that could potentially the district use it for is to create a ball field out there or something like that. But then that's going to be of no value when it rains because there's going to be water in it. So I know we've probably all seen parks and stuff around the area where they've turned retention areas into, football fields, stuff like that. But then how often throughout the year are you able to use that? So it's just for consideration. I'm not trying to persuade one way or another. I just wanted to share that. As of right now, it's my understanding with the superintendent's leadership team that we don't currently have anything planned there, and we haven't since I've been here. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. My
Okay.
next question would be to the city of Glendale. How are you going to maintain it? Because we actually have one in our neighborhood. and it was not fenced, it became a real eyesore. It just became kind of a garbage dump and a homeless shelter and all sorts of things. And I would not want that next to our school property. So I'm kind of curious as to whether you're going to landscape it, what you're going to do with it, knowing that
yes.
it gets full of water
Yes.
once every couple of
Well,
years.
Let me tell you that we own this one right there.
That little bitty
and,
one.
And we have to clean the homeless out of there from time, because we got a nice brick wall. They're shielded and shaded right there.
And I'm not
and we
picking
have to
on
go
the
in
whole,
there. But
don't take me that way.
I'm
I
sorry?
just know it got to be a trash dump.
It is. It can be. It would depend on what we negotiated, but I couldn't imagine that you wouldn't want us to take care of the drainage portion of that, kind of the weeds and things like that. If we end up either having easement, if we owned it, obviously we'd have to do that. But I can't imagine there'd be anything short of us taking care of it from a maintenance standpoint, like drainage improvements.
Okay, how
No, the
about
weeds-
beautification? Because
yeah.
these people's backyards are going to be looking at that.
Right now, we're not planning on doing any type of beautification there. No shrubs, trees, grass, planting. It would look essentially the same as it is now, but deeper. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't ask for that in the negotiation, but that's not my plan right now.
Okay, then my next question is, I'm familiar with districts wanting to sell property in the past, and it has to go to, and this maybe is for us, go to vote, it has to go to the voters because we don't own it, the voters own it. Is this a different situation? Does anybody know? Maybe
Mr. Shields or?
Mr. Shields, do you know?
Unfortunately, I do not have the answer to that question. Mr. Huseman was working on that component to it, so I can speak to him and find out and get you
Okay.
that answer for you. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it this evening, so I don't want to stand up here and tell you something that's not correct,
Okay,
but I will get the answer for you and make sure
Okay.
we get that information to you.
thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Shields, how much is it per year to maintain this piece of land?
I do have that data. Trying to keep up with Ed Services and data. I'm way behind. As I mentioned earlier, I do have some real rough numbers. Currently, we send roughly about 6 grounds personnel over there for 2 full days. So that's 8 hours a day for 2 days on a quarterly basis. That equates to roughly costing us about $6,000 on an annual basis. That's $5,200 for salary and benefits for the hours, the man hours and the labor that's there. And then, of course, you have about $800 for fuel and supplies to keep that clean.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Any
And,
other
you-
questions?
No, for the city of Glendale, this is really not a serious comment, but kind of serious. I've been wanting a billboard for the district for a long time, but we cannot afford it. So you have a basin, you have land, you have money, you have the wall. We definitely need to talk about potential billboard for the district on that land.
We can talk about that.
All right.
So one thing that I didn't mention that would definitely happen is there would be a fence along Grand Avenue protecting that basin. So for that, I don't know, it's probably about a quarter mile there. So because the city code is anything over 3 feet has to have a fence to protect it. So we would have a fence on the front. It'd be similar to the one that's, what's that, southeast of there. So there would be a fence on the front side up against Grand. So that was one thing.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Is everyone okay? Do we need a recess or do you want to go straight through? Okay, let's go. It is getting late. All right, we're going to move to C, information item. C1, research study for ASU College of Health Solutions. C2, research study, ASU Exceptional Student Services. C3, financial report. The submitted monthly report provides the district's financial status as of the report date, October 21st, 2022. D, public comment. D1, public comment. There is no public comment today. E, consent agenda items. E1, approval of consent agenda items. I call for a motion that the governing board approve consent agenda items E2, E4, E5, E6, E7, E8, and E9. Did I say that correctly? E10, E11. And I didn't have to say E. I said E2 through, yeah, okay. All right. Do I have a motion for that?
I move that we approve the consent agenda items E2, E4, E5, E6, E7, E8, E9, E10, E11. Was there an E1?
No. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. All right, moving to E3. Personnel agenda. I call for a motion that the governing board approve E3 personnel agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda item E3 personnel agenda.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. Discussion?
I had asked for this to be pulled off of the agenda because I wanted to share some comments about the piece of that item that relates to personnel receiving stipends for additional stipends for covering classrooms, dividing the classrooms or using their prep time. It seems I want to make sure that we are adequately compensating our staff who do that. It's a huge commitment to give up your prep time and then still be prepared to teach your class when you've given up your time to cover another class. From what I can see, they get $30 for doing that. It's even more of a challenge for the students and the staff if you wind up taking 10, 12 students into your classroom that have not been in your classroom, that don't know your routines. You might not have the adequate materials to work with them. And so my main point in bringing this out was to make sure that we are adequately compensating them, that we're doing it in an equitable way. If we are looking at what other districts are doing in this situation, I do feel like I only counted 20 incidents of this. So it does seem like we are doing a reasonable job of getting substitutes, but I still think it's an item that we need to address. Our staff has done an amazing amount of work for us, and I don't want them burned out because we're putting extra pressure on them. It seemed like most of the situations were at one particular site, so we need to look at why that site has more need for this. Or is it just that they're reporting it better than some other schools are? You never know. So that was the reason why I pulled it off.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Would you like a response now, or would you like someone to follow up with you?
They can follow up with me later.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. The most fun part of the meeting. F, board policies. F1, first reading of policy IMB, teaching about controversial/sensitive issues. I call for a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy IMB, teaching about controversial/sensitive issues. Someone?
I move that we approve the first reading of policy IMB, teaching about controversial and sensitive issues.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. Any discussion?
It looks to me like, I mean, that's a huge change from influence to responsibility, but, and we move from values to education. Those are the only two words that are changed in this policy? Yep. Okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Moving to F2, first reading of policy IHA, Basic Instructional Program. I call for a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy IHA, Basic Instructional Program.
I move that we approve policy IHA.
First reading. Ms. Dale Campo. I mean, Ms. O'Neill Frantz. I'm so getting everybody's name bad today.
Names tonight.
The first reading.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill Frantz. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Moving to first reading of policy JLDA, school counselors and psychologists. I call for a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy JLDA, school counselors and psychologists.
I move the first reading of policy JLDA, school counselors and psychologists.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I just need a little clarification. Is the way I understand this is now any psychologist that comes onto campus is for the purpose of working with our students will have to have what, a licensure?
They're exempt.
They're exempt from the licensure. Okay. And
They are certified.
they are certified, but they're exempt from the licensure.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
I had to read that a couple times also. I think there's some double negatives in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and just for clarification, Dr. Mayas?
Which is it's consistent with our practice. All of our school psychologists have a certification from the Department of Education, and by practice, we don't require a clinical license.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving to F4, first reading of policy JJIA, intramural sports. I call for a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy JJIA, intramural sports.
I move that we approve the first reading of policy JJIA, intramural sports.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Dale Campo. Any discussion?
I just need some clarification because once again, the wording was a little confusing to me. I'm going to say what I understand, and and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that if a person wishes to play in one of our teams that is a girls' team, that person needs to have been identified at birth as a female.
That's correct.
But if they want to, but on the boys' team, there's not the same stipulation. Anybody can play on the boys' team, no matter what the person's sex was identified as at birth.
That is correct.
Okay, I understand it then. And in reality, this is a law. We don't really have any say over it one way or the other, even though my personal feelings might not agree. All right.
Any other discussion?
I would comment that the consequences of this is legal action. And so I would propose that, and I'm sure we've already done that, but our district should have legal counsel on this to make sure that we're compliant.
Dana, it is in compliant or with the state statute.
Okay.
All right, and I'll just give my last comments is that I took an oath to uphold the laws of the state of Arizona, and this is a law of the state of Arizona, so I, of course, will ensure that I am staying with my oath. But I brought my flag today to say that we are not going anywhere, we are not going back in the closet, and that we are going to support our trans students no matter what. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Moving to F6, first reading, policy IJL, library material selection and adoption.
Wait a minute, wasn't there another interscholastic one?
Moving to F5, the first reading of policy JJIB, interscholastic sports. I call for a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy JJIB, interscholastic sports.
I move that we approve the first reading of JJIB interscholastic sports.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Any discussion?
I have some concerns about the section in this policy about concussions and head injuries. If I read it correctly, and again, I guess it's already been, it's a law, but if I read it correctly, if one of our students suffers a head injury and they are pulled out of the game, they can return to the game if someone gives them permission to return to the game. But in order to return to subsequent games, they have to go out and get medical release that says that might not be the right word, but the release that says that they can come back and play in subsequent games. So I'm kind of concerned. It doesn't seem like it lines up to me that if you get a head injury, you are pulled out of the game, and whoever's there can make a decision to let you go back. But then you have to, then there's more complicated things to come back later. I don't know that I made that clear.
And just for reference, are you on
Isn't this,
the part that says a student who is suspected of sustaining a concussion in a practice session, a game, or other? Is that where you're looking at?
find where I found it.
That one? So it's D. Mm-hmm.
D.
And so, yeah, so that's the good thing is that this is a first reading of the policy. So what we'll do is we'll ensure that in between now and the second reading that we get those questions answered. Is that okay, Ms. De Ocampo?
Yeah, yes, that is okay. I'm just concerned that, because we've all read about what's been happening in some of our athletes, that a person, one of our students would be put back into the game and not adequately diagnosed. And sometimes, as we also know, the ramifications of these head injuries don't show up for a couple of hours later. So I want to make sure that we are making a good decision about sending him back to the game immediately.
It does say evaluated by and receives written clearance. So that sounds a little more than just maybe a parent.
Yeah, but who's doing
It says to assume participation from a healthcare provider who has been trained. So I'm assuming, plus we have to remember this is a law, so we can't change anything.
Oh, these are laws?
Yeah.
Yeah, this references ARS, Arizona Revised Statutes 15-341.
And AIA as well.
To clarify, though, it does say whether the day of or the next day, both require the health provider clearance.
So do we have someone on site that can do the health clearance at all of our games?
We don't, which is why they wouldn't be permitted to return until their provider provides that clearance.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving to F6, first reading of policy IJL, library materials selection and adoption. I call for a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy IJL, library materials selection and adoption.
I move that we approve the first reading of policy IJL, library materials selection and adoption.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Yes. Geez, I'm really wordy tonight. That's what you get because I forgot to come last time. So now I have a lot to say this time. My concern with this is how it seems unwieldy to me that our staff is going to need to provide families with the lists of which books the students have been checking out. Is this supposed to be done on a weekly basis, a monthly basis? How often is this supposed to be being done? How much more work is this going to be? Am I on the right one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. There's no additional funding to help us with this mandate. which is fairly typical. They always mandate things with no money. But I am concerned that how we are going to communicate this information out to the family, putting a note in the child's backpack might not get it there, and the amount of time that our personnel is going to be involved in fulfilling this responsibility.
And in response to what you're sharing, Ms. De Ocampo, first I want to publicly share my gratitude for Mr. Tanner Kent, who's out in the audience right now, who's been working really hard to support our team in this area, because we're committed to ensuring that our children have the most current books, most relevant to meet their needs, and just ensuring that we're developing strong readers and know how much interest has to do with that. But I just want to reassure you that we are working closely together to ensure that that we're still able to do that and comply with the law, and we're not worried about putting any more pressure or adding to the responsibility. Like we are committed to ensuring we have a good system that complies with the law yet still achieves the purpose that we serve.
Thank you.
I'll just add real quick. I don't know if it's the case with other schools, but ATS does require parental consent for all items in the public library. I believe that you need 2 or 3 parents to approve each book, and I'm a big proponent of that. I've read my share of kids' books and add my signatures. So for parents to be involved, this statute is an invitation for parents to be involved. And so go to your public library and approve some books.
And that's what we're trying to, Tanner is helping us develop a consistent process throughout the district where we have input and it's just consistent and standard throughout the district.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we are moving to F7. First reading of policy ECAA, security surveillance cameras. Call for a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy ECAA, security/surveillance cameras.
I move that we approve the first reading of policy ECAA, security surveillance cameras.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Are we putting them in classrooms? Where are we putting these cameras?
Yeah, so that is a great question. For Superintendent Mayes to give us a brief description of this policy, of why we need this policy.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And Mr. Rivera will probably be able to answer it best. But so you just let me know if you want to add to anything that I will state. But in this area, I would like to publicly thank Mr. Rivera for his hard work in making sure that our campuses are as safe as possible. And we are looking to, well, number one, we already have cameras. And they've been in our schools now. And so it's necessary, just because we already currently have them, that we have these policies in place just to ensure that that everything we do complies with the law. And then in addition to that, as far as additional cameras, we are looking to purchase cameras that allow us to better survey the perimeter of parking lots, playgrounds, just to ensure that, again, that we're protecting our schools. And so, yet at the same time, we know that they could capture video of children. And so then that's where this comes into play, just to make sure that we are following all the laws and everything that protects children. So, but it's about safety from the outside and protecting our schools, if that makes sense.
Okay, so not in classrooms.
Exactly.
Okay.
Any other discussion? And just to Dr. Mayes' comment, there have been, recent burglaries of tires in parking lots. There has been catalytic converters that have been stolen from our transportation department in our yard. And so I really appreciate the focus on safety, but also to the team who modernized our safety plan to ensure that students are protected from any outside external threats. So thank you very much. Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Moving to G, new business. G1, proposal to determine the request from the city of Glendale for the Carol G. Peck retention area. The administration recommends that the governing board consider the proposal from the city of Glendale. The city of Glendale requests that AESD, in conjunction with the city of Glendale, consider the real estate acquisition process as outlined in the presentation by the city of Glendale. This would be conducted as a study session. I call for a motion that the governing board requests a detailed proposal from the city of Phoenix regarding a real estate acquisition.
City of Glendale.
I call for a motion that the governing board approve the first I'm so sorry. Where are we? I call for a motion that the governing board request a detailed proposal from the city of Glendale regarding a real estate acquisition.
I move that we request a detailed proposal from the city of Glendale regarding a real estate acquisition.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. A discussion. One of the things that I'm excited that, this is the first part of the process. I know that Mr. Solorio is not here, but I also am looking forward to having Mr. Solorio's input in this entire process. That's all I have to say. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving to G2, resolution. I call for a motion that the governing board adopt the proposed resolution to support the override of the constitutional aggregate expenditure limit for fiscal year 2023. Someone, please.
Well, something happened to my computer here. I'll move it.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropesa. Any discussion?
No discussion for me.
Okay. Ms. De Ocampo?
No
Any
discussion.
Okay. Ms. O'Neill France, you good? All right. I would like to thank Dana, the superintendent, everybody involved, our legal team for putting this resolution before us. We see in the resolution that we could estimate potentially have $18 million taken from our budget if the constitutional aggregate expenditure limit is not overridden for the next for this budget, if that makes sense. All those in favor say aye.
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 Absolutely, aye.
Motion passes. All right, moving to H, human resources. H1, revised job description for director of preschool. I call for a motion that the governing board approve the revised director of preschool job description.
I move that we approve the revised director of preschool job description.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. Discussion?
I think everybody knows preschool is near and dear to my heart. I think that our preschools program has expanded rapidly. I applaud the human resources and the team that rewrote this job description. I know how difficult that job is. And with the amount of preschools that we currently have in our district, it is imperative that we hire someone who has the qualifications that are listed in this job description, and that we give them adequate support so that they can do this job well.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? I have a question for Superintendent Mayes or for Ms. Perry. In terms of salary, it says that the revisions, proposed revisions are a 12-month position, administrative salary schedule director level 97. What was the salary previously?
It was the same.
Okay. And so there's no changes?
No, the changes were in just being more clear in the description of the responsibilities
Thank you.
Qualifications.
and the qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving to I, comments and communications. I1, comments from governing board members.
I owe everyone an apology for not being here the last time. I'm so sorry. Our daughter was in town. I took her to the airport and stayed and helped all the refugees that were coming in that day and just forgot it was Thursday. I'm sorry. I know you missed me.
You? Ms. O'Neill? I would like to comment on the ATS parking lot and the Valencia Gap Gym. Congrats, Mr. Shields, for your team and also for just the progress on those projects. I pass by them every once in a while just to check them out. And the ATS one is really blowing my mind. And so I'm super excited for them to have that reconstruction. A lot has happened since we last met. I think we had the James W. Rice turf field in between board meetings. Is that correct? I think we did. Yeah, so thank you to all the community partners that were at the James W. Rice opening. Thank you to our community relations department, Dr. Myers. Thank you to Mr. Shields and everybody who helped put that together. Also, special thanks to the NFL. And it was just a really great event. I attended a community meeting at Sevilla School, and that was with the neighborhood block watch, and and Gabriel was there with me. It was really good to hear their concerns and to also invite them to meetings like this. Also, a point of personal privilege is that I attended the ASBA, the Arizona School Board Association Maricopa County meeting, and I personally received an award for boardmanship. So just wanted to let you all know. The last thing I have actually might be for the next piece. Hearing no other discussion, we're going to move to I2, Governing Board Direction and/or Agenda Item Request. No?
Yeah, well, I just, not that you are not doing this, Gabriel. I just want to ensure that for any of our social media sites or anything, that we are continuing to always monitor it to make sure that it is represents our school and our beliefs. And so, and I know, Gabriel, again, that's nothing against you. I just want to make sure we're doing it. Something happened that made me start thinking about it. So just always keeping the K-8, what our whole purpose is, education.
Okay, and my requests or comments are about the Alhambra Resource Center. I know that we do the food distributions every fall in November. So if the board can be briefed on those activities, because I love being out there. So I want to be able to take the day off so I can be out there volunteering with you all. And I also want to know what the Alhambra Resource Center is doing to prepare for the cold and for the winter. I know that some of our kids and their families can't afford jackets. They can't afford socks. They can't afford winter clothes. So that's the avenue that I see that we provide those resources. And so just want to ensure that there's a plan for the transition in climate for our kids. Any other discussion or requests? All right, going to I3, comments from superintendent and executive team.
Thank you. Ms. Bilyeu, would you begin our comments, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, President Conchas, members of the board, and Dr. Myers. I'll start with that we are very pleased to announce that Alhambra will be hosting our annual mobile pantry again on December 2nd. We plan to distribute 600 food boxes, provide extra support for families at a very strategic date between the holidays. The plan is to host in 3 locations as we did last year, and we very much appreciate the collaboration of our Family Resource Center and our child nutrition team, in addition to many, many volunteers for making this happen. Promotional materials will be distributed closer to the event, but just in case you missed it, December 2nd is the day you take off work. In response to staff survey feedback, Alhambra reinstated the Staff Eat with Students program during lunch. The goal is to provide an opportunity for staff to eat lunch with students in the cafeteria, and this provides an opportunity for the Alhambra team to model healthy eating behaviors and discuss overall health and wellness with our kids while enjoying a delicious child nutrition meal at no cost to the employee. The program is voluntary, and Alhambra employees who are willing to support the goals of the program sign up, stating that they are willing and able to contribute to these goals. And since the start of the program, we have supported 4,912 staff lunches, which equates to 4,912 opportunities that our employees have engaged in moments with our students, eating alongside them, being positive role models for their growing relationships with food. Employees who prefer to enjoy a cafeteria meal in an alternate location are always welcome to purchase a meal for the value price of $3.85. And we encourage you, because our food is very delicious, to come and join us for lunch anytime you like. The Alhambra Eye Care for Kids Clinic has secured a doctor for the winter and is resuming regular clinic visits. So last Tuesday's clinic screened 37 students. Clinic days through December can be found on the FRC calendar as well as on the community events and meetings calendar, which you can find on our website. Another note from the FRC is that Touchstone parenting classes are getting ready to kick off. Our parent volunteer coordinators are working very hard to register families for this resource during parent-teacher conferences, which are happening, well, they happened 30 minutes ago. They ended 30 minutes ago, but they were happening now. We are also pleased in response to, if you'd like to add a bright spot to your day, which makes me kind of nervous now about social media, but we do have a dashboard I can share with you on how we monitor our social media. However, our community relations director led a training for our school correspondents yesterday, and if you ever want a bright spot to your day and you're not able to physically make it to a campus, I encourage you to check out our social media. I don't know the ins and outs of how our school correspondents post, but I can tell you that it is a bright spot of my day to monitor the Instagram posts. I mean, it definitely brings very happy smiles to your phone or your computer screen every moment. So every time I look, I very much appreciate Gabriel and his team of school correspondents because they're doing a very good job. If you'd like access to the dashboard, I'm sure he'd be willing to hook you up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. And Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. Good evening, President Cochas, governing board members, and Superintendent Dr. Maes. So I have some great updates and celebrations from across our district. I'll start with Catalina. So our Catalina school, just as Mr. Ruiz and Ms. Steffenbaugh shared data with us, Catalina is one of many of our schools who really invest in their data. And so they have used their fall benchmark data to be very strategic in how they're providing interventions for their kindergarten through third grade students. They push in intervention and they pull out intervention. But what's so exciting is from the beginning of the year to the first quarter benchmark, they're already seeing growth. So very motivating, very exciting, and validation that their effort is coming to fruition. At Madrid, we had a wonderful parent link class titled Understanding English Language Learners and Assessments. So during the class, the families were able to learn about strategies that they use in the language development, working with their children at home. Families also learned how to interpret the Azella scores, which is our state assessment. And the parents' feedback was very appreciative for just learning more about how to support their children in these ways. And then as a side note, the Phoenix Library was there and 15 families were able to sign up. So they're getting books. In our Arizona K Online Academy, math has been their focus this year. They're using the support of the Math Moment in Partnership and then their implementation of ALEX, which is a personalized adaptive online program. But what they're seeing is students really owning their pacing and learning of math. They have 2 students who have already finished, who have shown evidence that they have learned the standards of their current grade level and are already pushing into the grade level of next year where they would be going. So they're rapidly, sure. Sure.
That's okay.
They're rapidly moving forward in their math skill development. At Granada East, they are definitely thinking outside of the box when it comes to really wanting to educate the whole child, being restorative, and helping those kids who sometimes make choices that end up with consequences pulling them out of learning to giving them opportunity back into learning. So they're doing a Saturday school. And their Saturday school is wrapped around building strong, positive, and productive citizens through character education, academics, community service, social emotional supports. And this is all an extension of what they already have on campus every day, which is their Roadrunner Club. And their two counselors and administration team are very involved in the Roadrunner Club. But what a beautiful way to help kids learn such valuable life lessons in a positive opportunity. And, you know, that sacrifice of coming in on Saturdays doesn't hurt. At ATS, we have two teachers, 7th grade teacher, Ms. Brashear, and then 2nd grade teacher, Ms. Kroll. They have united forces, and so Ms. Brashear's 7th grade ELA students help Ms. Kroll's 2nd grade students, teaching them reading and writing skills. So the 7th graders are becoming like mentors and young teachers. Hopefully we're grooming them to want to work with us when it comes that time. But they're modeling, they're reading together, they're citing evidence, they're annotating what they're reading, and really trying to develop that comprehension that goes along with those reading skills. And then a side note, just with the data presentation from our Ed Services team, they have, they're bringing together a group of teachers who are going to be building our Q2 Common Formative Assessment benchmarks. So the teachers do have input on that next level for us of understanding progress of our kids. And lastly, our outreach coordinator professional development has begun. It is led by Ms. Billy and I, and yesterday's training was about giving quality feedback, and we had a lot of fun and had some learning, and thank you, Dr. Mayes, for attending. So, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, everyone. I just want to thank everyone. I mean, honestly, everyone around the district is working so hard. And to add on to what Melissa just shared about our outreach coordinators and the training that they had yesterday, thank you to Melissa and Mandy both for leading that work. And what I appreciated most was, again, this was an afternoon meeting, 3 o'clock. I think we were out of there. Actually, we were supposed to be out of there at 4:30, and they wouldn't stop talking and sharing with one another. But what I appreciated most was as they were reflecting on their learning, and they were assigned the task of sharing out. And one of the teams, so you can get an idea of the energy in the room, one of the groups put on a rap. So they didn't just share, what they learned, but they made a rap out of it. And so hearing them each with their little shout outs, it was adorable. But to me, it just spoke to just the wonderful team that we have, as they were so committed to learning. And like I said, and they represent really what we're seeing across the district is very, very hardworking, committed educators who we are grateful for. Thinking about what Ms. Del Campo spoke to with in relationship to absences, I just want to share with you that Mandy, Claire, and I are getting even closer by the day, as we have spent all week, all day late together, having staffing meetings, meeting one-on-one with our principals, really looking at staffing, how we're currently using our ESSER funds, preparing for just, as we know that those will soon go away, making sure they're being spent in the classrooms, and that we're taking care of people as we look to see how to ensure that everyone is taken care of as we transition away from those funds. But we're looking very closely at absences. We're having a lot of conversations. So I assure you that we have a wonderful team, and we have our eyes on everything. And I'm just excited to see what will continue to come. As I think about even our last meeting I'll share was about staffing. And before coming here, and Stacy O'Rourke, the principal at Madrid, just wanted to show us her data real quick, because they had done progress monitoring for all their interventions, and what FastBridge was predicting for growth, they more than doubled. And so a lot of great things going on across the district, and I just thank everyone for being such a wonderful team to work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mayes, Ms. Biliu, and Ms. Gonzalez. Moving to J, meeting closing. J1, the next governing board meeting will be November 17th, 2022. J2, calendar of events. I would read all of it, but it's a lot. So you have that right there. And then J3, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.